Let's kick it.
All right. Thank you thank you for checking out the Hospitality Strategy Lab. My name is Jason Littrell. My guest today is pioneer in the field of understanding how your brain makes purchasing decisions. Please welcome Dr. Kai-Markus Mueller, a leading neuroscientist, professor, and the award-winning author of The Invisible Game, who developed the innovative neuropricing method. Dr. Mueller, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Looking forward to this one.
Okay, so tell me about your work.
Well, my main job is being a professor of consumer behavior at a German business school, and I'm interested in how the brain makes purchasing decisions, how we prefer or don't prefer to buy this or that steak, to book this or that room, or to buy this or that drink. And why we do this, and why we are sometimes happy with the price and sometimes we are not so happy with the price. By the way, I have side jobs as a director of pricing research with Neurensics. It's a consumer neuroscience research firm in Amsterdam, and I'm chief of behavioral strategy with Rateboard. That's a dynamic pricing company for hotels in the Alps based in Innsbruck, Austria.
Okay, so you're not busy at all.
Not at
You're
all.
just waiting around for the phone to ring, huh? That sounds like 10 full-time jobs that you have.
Kind of, yes. I also have a family.
Wow. Okay. So, how does your work apply to? Let me just zoom out. How do people make decisions? So, how do people decide which cup of coffee to buy?
That oftentimes depends actually on the choice architecture. So we believe that we go out to a store or we go out to a bar and we want to buy this or that coffee. However, it depends on which choices are presented to us, and that influences strongly which decision we are going to make. So a classic is you go to the cinema and there are 3 versions of popcorn. A large one that's somewhat overpriced and a small one that's also somewhat oddly priced. But then there's one that looks like the golden middle, and it seems to have just the right price. Suddenly, that looks like it's a really good choice, and that's the thing we want, right? Obviously, if you think about it, it's just all based on how the owner of the cinema has designed the choice of those popcorns. And interestingly, on how you actually are making these choices, people are going to buy the middle one or they're going to buy the small or large one.
Okay. Well, in America, of course, we buy the supersized version of everything, regardless of what the price is. It seems like we don't care. All right. All right. So one thing that I've always been bothered by is when I walk into a restaurant or a bar and I see just like infinite choices. How do you design how do you design the choice that you want people to make?
A lot of choices are a problem. Why? Because our brain really dislikes making choices. It's hard work, you got to think, you potentially even got to calculate. And despite the fact some of us like numbers, really, we don't like to do this intuitively. It requires energy, actually. So, we also don't want to be forced to do something, right? So we ideally love the illusion of having made a decision. So if there is something that looks just like, oh, I figured out this is the beer I should be buying, then of course, if the host has been creating the choice architecture in a manner and in a way that this sounds like the right choice, then I feel like I have made this choice myself, and then I feel like, well, this is the right choice. Of course, the choice was indeed residing outside the outside my own brain, so to say. Here's maybe a little story to make this thing a little more intuitive and less theoretical. It's not from hospitality, but it has been actually demonstrated to work in hospitality in a very similar manner. So not so long ago, my cousin visited me, and he was wearing a new cashmere sweater. Now I'm talking European prices for sweaters, which are quite high. So he came to me and said it was 250 euros, so something like that, $250, $300 for this cashmere sweater. And I said, well, nice sweater. And he said, oh yeah, that was a bargain. It was just 250 euros. I was quite surprised. Like, okay, it's a nice sweater, and I think it's a wonderful choice. But why do you say it's a bargain. This is a very odd thing to say. So indeed, what had happened, he had gone to the store looking for a business sweater, and this guy, the sales guy, came up and he brought him a sweater that fit very well. He wanted to buy it, and it turned out that that first sweater was a Prada sweater, and the Prada sweater cost $800. So he afterwards felt like the Hugo Boss sweater for $250 is a good deal. And that is something that shows you how quickly our mind changes its perception in whether something is a good deal or a bad deal, right? If he had gone to Primark before, he had never been buying a €250 sweater.
Is that called anchoring?
That is anchoring, right? This is anchoring. This is the story about anchoring, right? Right. This is called anchoring. And you can anchor your customers with all kinds of good ideas, with the right drink or with an expensive steak. And you know what's really cool about hospitality is if you have a very, very expensive dish, for example, on your menu, and you don't have it always there, or you just have one of them per night or something like that in the freezer, it's sold out because you're so good. Well, so it's not the big deal, right? I mean, the retailer who has a sweater, if they sell the Prada sweater, they got to bring in a new one. So in hospitality, you have quite some leverage here. And the good thing is, people have a tendency to buy maybe the number two or the second cheapest or so. But the extremes, people have a tendency to not go for extremes in their choices. And so the extremes are the anchors, the cheapest and the most expensive products. Those are your anchors that define what the value perception of the other products are. And if you have some super cheap food in there, it's going to make everything else look expensive. If you have a very expensive dish in there, it's going to make the other dishes look cheaper. It's like giving a discount without giving a discount.
Okay. How does pricing relate to identity, like one's view of oneself? The reason I ask is because sometimes people order things and they go to a certain place because they see themselves as that kind of person. Now, how does that apply to pricing? Is there any correlation there?
Well, prices in general always send you a message, right? So a price is not just something that makes up for your cost in that product, but it also sends a message, right? It sends a message like we are this kind of restaurant or that kind of bar where specific people meet. Students have a different desire for prices than, I don't know, the people who visit the bar outside of Wall Street. So that kind of selects for people already. What also is actually really interesting is that the price doesn't just send a message about the personality and to the people visiting, but also a price influences how something tastes. That's been shown with hot chocolates, with wines, etc. Even in brain scanners, people have been expensive and cheap wine to drink, which was chemically exactly the same substance. So actually the scientists didn't even change the wine. They were given cheap wines and expensive wines to drink. And it turns out that their pleasure centers in their brain that code for tasting something really good, they were much more active than when they tasted a cheap wine. So you see that price is even a sensorial experience.
That's astonishing. That's really astonishing. What kind of mistakes are you seeing in pricing that when you walk into a place and you're like, what are you guys thinking?
Something that I see very often is that business owners, especially in hospitality, they think quite economical. For example, let's say there's a calibration mark on a glass, right? And we ran an experiment where we showed 2.5 centiliters calibration mark on a wine, and the wine was filled up to the 2.5 calibration mark. And we had a different scenario shown to different people where it's just a 0.1 calibration mark. So it's like significantly less than half the amount, filled slightly above that 0.1 calibration mark, right? So it was clearly much less than the other wine. So
you're talking about the etching on the glass that says that this is exactly what this measurement is.
Yes, exactly. We have that in Germany.
Yeah. No, we do that here. We don't do it enough, but it's typically not etched on the glass. It's like as in the curvature of the glass is a specific measurement. But
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
we know what you're talking about. We got it.
Okay. It's a very general thing. I mean, we use the calibration mark to get it some mathematical benchmark here. And what we did here was the following: we showed both of these to different students, and both classes were valued at €4.50. And we asked, would you recommend this restaurant? Right. So obviously, objectively, economically, the one that's filled up to the 0.25 mark is more and should be getting a higher rating, but it got a lower rating, right? Because it looks rather cheap, right? You get just what you paid for, just nothing, no add-on, right? The other one, however, was filled substantially above the 0.1 mark, and people rated it much better.
Even though it was much less in volume.
Even though it was much less, right? But it looked like the host was a generous person, right? Of course, the host was not a generous person because he charged much the same amount than the other host, right? The only difference here being the entire effect breaks down when you compare the two side by side. And we showed this to a third group of students, and they compared them side by side, the two, and they said, oh yeah, the one with the 0.25, the larger one, gets the higher rating. So here's so there's quite a bunch of a bunch of scenarios where people who work in hospitality think very economically and think like, oh well, objectively, this is better than nothing, right? We ran in a similar scenario. We, for example, showed a hotel with a gym that had 3 out of 5 machines working. Right. And the other hotel, we showed exactly the same hotel without that gym, right? Got the same effect, right? So a hotel that has no gym got a better rating or got higher willingness to pay than a hotel that had a gym that was slightly dysfunctional, right? So, and the issue is you only go to one hotel. You don't compare the two side by side. So once you are there and not everything is spectacular, you have a problem, right? Everything that looks a little bit all too frugal or seems to be not in perfect shape, it looks suboptimal. We've been also looking at, for example, breakfasts, right? Where we had eggs sunny side up and hard-boiled eggs were out. And it was it was worse than having no eggs at all in the breakfast, right? It's better you don't have any eggs than you have a menu where stuff wasn't working or buffet where the hard-boiled eggs were no longer served.
Okay, so what if you just had one type of eggs that was done perfectly, and you didn't offer a choice? You said we do eggs one way. We only do eggs like this, but they're the best in the world. Like, does that impact the perception of quality?
Yes, that's a decent way of marketing it, right? So, well, you can have 2 eggs as long as they are really good and everything's perfect as well. But I think to say we have a bunch of fewer choices. We have a good selection, but we have fewer choices, and everything we do is perfect is much better than having a lot of choices and then having a suboptimal preparation for these choices.
Sorry, go ahead, please.
Additionally, as I said before, the brain really doesn't like choices. So if you have this huge menu with lots and lots and lots of choices, you overburden the mind of the consumer. And in the end, you can only eat one schnitzel anyway.
Well, what about the perception of choice versus actual choice, where you say you can have this extremely customized, individualized experience, but then guide people into this one narrow scope. Like I had a guest on actually yesterday, and he runs a series of bagel shops, and they have literally there's literally millions of variables. Like if you game it out, but people end up ordering the same 10 things, and they already know what they're going to order before they walk in the door. Does that increase the cognitive load, or is that wise?
That's funny because it's one of the weird things about asking people explicitly what they want and conducting marketing research. If you ask people on the street, like, would you like to have a lot of choices? Would you like to have a lot of choices in your bagels? They would, they will say, yes, I want to have all the choices. I want to make all those decisions, right? But when you get in, it's much easier. You have these 5 or 10 versions, and they are called X, Y, and Z, and they have a fancy name, and then people will choose them. This has, for example, been very well studied with cell phone contracts, right? If you ask people whether they want to have a cell phone contract and have all the choices, they'll say, yeah, I want to choose the minutes, I want to choose the gigabytes download, and I want to make all these choices. But when it comes to the real sales data, people will never make these choices. They'll either take the S, M, or L version or XL version of the contract, and that's a predefined. That's a predefined right. It's an option, a predefined option, and they'll make this choice. And this is very similar to the bagel, and in any food we have.
All right, talk to me about free. What does free mean?
Free is something that makes our mind work differently. Typically, when we order something, we are in the economic mode. We think like we pay something and we get something. When you offer something for free, people will overvalue this dramatically. For example, giving people at the end of the service a free candy, free peppermint or something like that will increase their probability for tips, will increase their probability for positive ratings and for a positive experience drastically. In the European context, German and Austrian context is maybe the famous schnapps at the end of the food. Mm-hmm. The free schnapps. But yeah, so that's a classic. People will really overvalue this. Also, people really love things like free refills. That is something that people also have a tendency to overvalue, right? So classically, with flat rates as well as with free stuff, you often actually make more money because people overestimate the value of free. That's technically, that is also called, or that's closely related to a concept called transaction utility. So people don't just value the objective amount, but they actually value the deal itself. Well, my mother-in-law, she's a wonderful person, but she's an extreme version of that. So the other day, when my youngest daughter was starting school, there was a free school bag at a grocery store. So and as I'm a business person and a professor, so time is money. Nevertheless, on the Saturday we had to drive to some funny grocery store 10 miles away, so to get my daughter a free school bag with an apple and a tangerine and a pen or something like that. And my mother-in-law, she really valued that deal. And that is, the people do really enjoy the deal itself, and they really value the deal highly.
So the psychology isn't like, well, my time is worth $10 or $20 an hour, and it's going to take me an hour to get there and back. So this actually costing me $40 or $20 or whatever it is. They're thinking I'm getting a free bag, and then therefore I win. Cool.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, my family is quite frugal, and my dad would drive 20 miles out of the way to get 5 cents off a gallon of gas. So I totally get that. And that's called transaction utility. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, it's basically you value the deal itself.
Right. Over the exclusively, without considering anything else.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why you pay for one of the same beer, 3 times the price, whether you buy it from the grocery store or you buy it at a fancy resort.
Okay. All right. What about free as an enticement? There's a couple different layers of free that I wanted to explore with you. One of them is free as an enticement, as in come in, buy one, get one free, or come in for a free thing in order to do this. Like it's kind of like and then the other one is free as a surprise. But let's start with the first one. Like, what's free as an enticement? How does that work?
Okay, great. So free as an enticement works well. It works much better than discounts. Actually, what you have to watch out is that you don't attract the wrong crowd, right? You don't attract those people that you you don't train people to become bargain hunter, and you don't attract only the bargain hunters. But nevertheless, if people are having to make a choice between a bunch of bars or a bunch of restaurants, that typically works quite well because people don't calculate much. And when they are walking down a row of bars, that may be the decisive factor. It's a little bit like...
How do you distinguish? How do you get the right customer in there?
That's a tricky question. What's important about free is that it has a much less of an impact on the quality perception because we think differently. As I said, we don't think economically. We think more in terms of a gift or something like that. And a gift can be of high value, right? So it's important, or it's the right thing to do because it won't devalue, it won't have such a strong impact on the wine, for example. As we said, a discounted wine tastes less good. A free refill, it doesn't change the perception of the wine. So that's an important point, an important positive point. Yeah.
All right. Well,
And
let's
yeah,
get into free as a surprise, and I'll give you an example here. I referred to this example a million times. One of the best bars in the world called the Dead Rabbit, and if you walk into their cocktail bar on the second floor, it's widely considered one of the best bars in the world, reinforced year after year after year. And one of the things that they do is the first thing that they do is they give you a small taste of something. We call it in the business, we call it a splash, or we call it an amuse. And they always get a taste of something in their hand, and it never shows up on their bill. What goes through their mind when you hear that?
there goes a lot through my mind. One thing that works really well is reciprocity, right? We are social animals. We've grown up in small tribes, and when someone gave something to us, we were always reinforced to return that, right? And this runs deep. And we are working very well. This works very well with our this works well with our evolutionary mind. We want to give back, right? And we, of course, understand that the bar owner runs a business and the bar owner needs to make his money. And so we are much more likely to buy something there and to buy potentially an additional drink, especially if this is a particularly good bar, right? And if the expectation matches the taste, we're in the right business.
Okay. Is there any causal relationship between receiving something for free and spending more money?
Absolutely. Yes. We will spend more money simply because we want to give back. We are trained on reciprocity. We have learned that, and we have an evolutionary heritage to give back when somebody gives something to us. And therefore, we are spending more money and we are giving back. Plus the good taste. If it tastes good, it's always a reason to buy more.
Right. Of course. All right. I mean, this is played out time and time again. If you once you see it, you can't. Once you hear it, you can't unsee it. So it's like if you ever go to buy a car, for instance, they're going to give you a bottle of water the very first thing, and that's kind of what's interesting about the reciprocity is because we just feel compelled to reciprocate.
Yeah.
I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
What has neuroscience taught us about how the brain processes price? Did you have a story about that?
Yeah. So when we see something and we want it, and of course, maybe we've even tasted it before, we want it even more, our nucleus accumbens is active. That's the region in the brain that is active when we feel good, right? That is, when we get rewarded, when we feel pleasure, that's our pleasure center. Next thing, when we see a price, our pain area is being active, right? The insula, it's an area that's typically active when we feel pain. And then there's a balance between those two. When the pleasure is higher, our decision centers in the front of our brain are becoming active and we will buy. When the pain is higher, the decision centers will reduce their activity and we unfortunately won't buy. Beyond that, we also have developed in my laboratory, we have the tool to measure willingness to pay directly from the brain using the electroencephalogram. That's this thing that looks like a bathing cap that has the wire sticking out and where you can measure those brain waves. And this device is very cool when it comes to measuring whether something matches in the mind or not. So I could give you a word like bread and then a word butter, and your brain will signal to me that these two things match, right? If I give you the word internet and butter, it's the same 6 letters on the screen, but I'll get a mismatch because the internet has basically not much to do with butter. And I've further developed that signal into a tool whereby showing and explaining people a product and then showing different prices on and seeing whether the mind will, within a few hundred milliseconds, respond, quote unquote, with a yes or a no. And interestingly, When the price is too high, I'll get a yes. When the price is too low, I'll also get a yes. However, when the price fits right, I'll get a yes, right? So that's something where we could, for example, show that Starbucks had quite underpriced its coffee when they entered the European market. They were 60 cent too cheap. They were 60 cent below customer value perception, subconscious value perception. And that is something, interestingly, that classic market research, by just asking people, would have never found out, right? Because people
This is for
say,
Starbucks?
Oh, yeah, I like this cheap. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, so if they were 60 cents underpriced, then that's tens of millions of dollars in value for them, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's in the 2-digit millions, right? Because they sell billions of liters.
Yes, they do. That's fascinating.
That was for the European market. It's interesting because this is not anyone, right? This is Starbucks, and Starbucks really knows it does, especially in Germany. When they entered the market 15 years ago, people would stand in line, right, for warm water with caffeine and sugar, right? They would stand in huge lines, and they would buy a little bit of America. They would buy a little bit of the great wide world, and maybe the other gender looking at them when they walk around with a fancy new Starbucks cup. Mind, these things have, the fanciness has died down and it's become a normal thing, but still it has this, this American touch. And, coffee has a high margin, so you really want to hit the price right there. And even Starbucks, who really knows a lot about consumer psychology and a lot about marketing, in that case, they've been off by a few cents.
Crazy. Yeah. I mean, what I'm gathering so far is that, like, have less items on your menu, make something outrageously priced, whether high or low, and
put something outrageously high. Yes. Right.
Yeah.
On
and then
the menu.
Maybe put something free in the beginning and or the end. Primacy and recency.
Yes, that sounds really good. Putting something free at the beginning and the end works really well. Think about something that could be your Prada sweater, right? I think that's kind of an important message, right? Because that is something I've been telling to so many businesses in different industries. When that quote unquote Prada sweater doesn't sell, sometimes the businesses have the tendency to not offer it anymore, or to take it off the menu, or to take it off the list. And then, that defeats the purpose.
Right. Okay. I think we all know this, but I think that we just don't think that we should, or that we should. We don't have the courage to do it, to just like chop off 80% of our menu because it doesn't sell, because we think we should have it. Meanwhile, we're not asking our customers what they want, and we're not looking at the numbers of what we actually sell. So you sent me this paper. Just one last thing before I let you go is you sent me this paper about 10 instances of the less is better effect in tourism, systematic preference for reversal in humans, but not LLMs. What does all that mean? Explain that to me like I'm 6 years old.
Yes, so this is our latest scientific manuscript. It's not yet published, but it's currently under review. But it actually does talk about this fact that humans prefer something that looks really good. Like we had the story about the calibration mark. For example, an ice cream that is filled up fully is preferred to an ice cream that is in a much larger cup, but not filled up fully. So in this case, humans, when they just look at this one item that looks good, but is objectively less, they will prefer what is less. For example, the hotel that has no gym at all, over the hotel that has a gym but 2 dysfunctional devices in the gym. The effect breaks down or reverses when you show both of these things side by side. Then they'll choose the objectively better piece. And interestingly, we've been showing all these effects. We've created 10 of these effects, and all these effects, we've shown them to AI models like Perplexity, ChatGPT. And it turns out that these AI models do not have this effect. They always prefer the objectively better hospitality choice. We've tested hotel rooms, we've tested train rides, we've tested drinks, we've tested breakfast choices and stuff like that. So a bunch of all throughout tourism and hospitality. The AI models did not have that effect. They always preferred the objectively and economically better version. So that's interesting, and it shows us how what makes us uniquely human. We want to have something that looks good, not something that's necessarily is objectively good.
Okay, well, where does the rubber meet the road with that assessment? Because what I'm guessing is that we are going to kind of start more and more outsourcing our opinions and thoughts and ideas and decisions to AI to decide for us. And
Yes.
so, if is that where this is headed?
Well, there are two things I'm really interested in. The first one is, will AI make decisions for us? And as long as you buy off the internet, this is probably something that will come, right? Right now, we are still influenced when we look at booking.com, but who knows, maybe there'll come up new tools that help consumers make decisions and not fall for the wrong hotel on booking.com. When we go out in real life to restaurants, I don't see that coming yet. The second part I'm really seeing coming, and that is that AI will be able to create choice architectures that will nudge visitors to this or that product, right? Without, for example, having to discount a product or to having to change a price, simply putting the right things next to each other, and that way making you buy the product that the host wants to actually sell. That I see coming, and I'm pretty sure that there'll be tools on the market in not so long from now that are going to enhance your menus and enhance your choices and your choice architectures.
Okay, thank you so much. Dr. Mueller, thank you for being so generous with your time. My name is Jason Littrell. This has been the Hospitality Strategy Lab. I've been here with Dr. Kai-Markus Mueller, the author of The Invisible Game, and he developed the neuropricing method. Dr. Mueller, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jason.
All right, cheers.